Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonkson, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast with my good friend Pastor Carl on how to stay fresh and passionate as a leader. When you're in ministry for a while, if we're all honest, sometimes that sort of freshness and that zeal and that passion can dwindle. And how do we keep it alive so that it's not just a career, but it's a calling for our life that stays true throughout all of our time as a minister on this earth? And so we want to make sure we're always passionate and we're moving forward. And that's what we're talking about today. Before we jump into it, make sure to check out churchboom.org. If you've ever thought about being a coach and you wanted to know what it would be like to coach other pastors, you can do that. We have a coaching certification program that you can check out at churchboom.org. So make sure to check that out and become a coach yourself. It could become a second income for you. It could become a second chapter in your life. So, hey, let's jump into the conversation with Pastor Carl. You're going to love this one. Good to have you on, man. How can I serve you today, Carl? What's on your mind?
Yeah, thanks, Pastor Chris. First question I got is, what insights have you gained about navigating tough decisions in ministry, especially as a pastor? I think oftentimes it's trying to figure out that balance, that tension between leading with grace and truth, as well as care and candor.
Yep, absolutely. So one thing I would say is I've said a lot of times to pastors, Carl, that often we are one tough decision or one tough conversation away from a breakthrough. And we know the conversation we need to have. And often we know the decision we need to make. We coach pastors all across the nation, and it's pretty rare that they don't know the conversation they need to have or the decision they need to make. They know, everybody knows, but we avoid it. The thing is I think it's important to know, first of all, when dealing with a tough conversation, it's usually a couple things. One, you want to make sure as the leader that if there's a tough conversation to be had, it's usually because something started to go wrong. When something started going wrong, that's when you need to deal with it. If you deal with it way over here and you waited too long, now the rest of the team even recognizes it, it's usually too late. Usually it's not going to turn out good. I'm not saying all the time, but if you have to recognize it before anybody else recognizes it. If you wait till everybody recognizes it, it's too late. You got to recognize it over here. The second reason you have to recognize it over here is because I always say this: pay now or pay later. But if you pay later, you'll always pay more. You always pay more when you pay later. And so I think that's such an important part of it is knowing that and knowing what tough conversation in the situation you're talking about. You have to be willing to have that tough conversation early on is the most important thing. One thing I wrote in the book I wrote, one of the books I wrote, Saving Your Church from Itself. And the subtitle is 6 Subtle Behaviors That Tear Teams Apart. And you got to recognize the subtle behavior that's tearing the team apart. You this recognize it over here. How you address it is important, Carl. And this is going to get really practical, really practical. This is like 101 tough conversation. If I was talking with you, let's say that you're on my staff, and I've just been noticing, like, I don't know, man, you've been a little bit negative in staff meetings. You've been a little bit more critical. You don't really seem to come with solutions. You come with more problems. I don't know, something. And here's how I would do it. Hey, Carl, man, we need to meet. Okay, cool. So we meet, we sit down, door shuts, it's me and you, whatever. It's our first conversation. Hey, man, I want to meet with you, Carl. And hey, I've just been noticing that things have been a little different in the last few months. You don't seem to come with a lot of solutions, but you're always voicing the problem. I've noticed, like 2 weeks ago, you got a little bit upset about that. And then a few weeks before, you got a little bit more negative, a little more upset in that. And I was just wondering, Carl, man, I don't know what's going on, but I was wondering if you could speak into that for me. Now, I want to point out 2 things. One, it took me about 30 seconds to toss the ball back over to you. That is important. Secondly, I said to you, I was wondering if you could speak into that for me. I immediately let you speak into it. And I put the ball over to your court. I think the reason I do it within 30 seconds, I think guys all the time, they'll go into this 8-minute speech making all these assumptions. I don't know. Dude, maybe your mom died and you just haven't told anybody. So I'm going to do an 8-minute speech on why being negative isn't right and why being positive, and it's a staff value. And I've been noticing that I'm like, dude, I don't even know what's going on in your life. Let's first find out that. So I was wondering if you could speak into that, me. Now, once in a while, I've heard, well, you're right. Dude, my dad, I haven't told I had this happen. My dad's in a mental hospital. He's been there for 3 months. It's burdening us like crazy. And I haven't told anybody, and I'm so sorry. Dude, all of a sudden it's just boom, turns into something else. I've also had, which happened to me just recently, by the way, I had someone say, hey, Carl, man, I wish you could speak into that for me. Well, you know what, man, I've just been noticing this. And I'm thinking, okay, he's got a problem. Now he speaks for about 5 or 6 minutes. In the middle of it, Carl, he said, and I know, man, I mean, I can have a really bad attitude during all of this, but I'm just telling you, it's really frustrating me. Then at the end of the 6 minutes when he's done, I went 30 seconds, he went 6 minutes. I said, Carl, I go, you use the phrase bad attitude. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Boom, he widens up the problem all the more. Now, guess what's happening? We're not solving a problem I said you had. We're solving a problem you said you had. And that changes everything in the conversation.
That's so good.
Radically changes.
And what I'm hearing is you're kind of allowing curiosity to lead the way.
Yeah, it is.
Which is very helpful. Yeah.
Yep. You let curiosity lead the way. It might be something like, hey, my dad's in a mental hospital. And that's like, okay, that's a different issue altogether. Thank God I didn't give you a 20-minute speech about alignment. But yet on the other hand, if it's like, nope, this guy's got an issue. Now what I want to do is solve the problem he said he had.
That's so good.
If he's solving the problem he said he had, he's not defensive anymore.
Yeah. It's great.
Like, I didn't say you had a bad attitude. You did. Now let's just talk about that.
That's great.
Not totally different tone when they're solving the problem they said they had.
Yeah, so helpful. Well, what about, I'd love to ask you about vision and execution. Switching gears, what steps have you found kind of effective in turning just higher level vision into actionable plans as far as like ensuring the execution stays aligned with the bigger picture of where you're trying to go?
Yep. Well, that is, I love that word execution. It sounds deathly, but I also like it because I think it's, I see a lot of pastors really, and leaders in church staff and lead pastor, whatever, struggle with the execution and going after execution. In other words, you'll have a staff member, maybe you have a staff member and they are not executing well. Maybe they're phenomenal at at worship. Let's just pick on that. They're phenomenal at worship. I mean, they get on there and they tear it up. Monday through Saturday, they're a debacle. They don't execute. They don't follow through. They don't do what they say they're going to do. I think to step back on that word of execution is, I think we have to figure out what the problem is. I feel that often people hide under one of two umbrellas. They hide under the umbrella of talent or they hide under the umbrella of personality. So they're phenomenal at worship and everybody loves them and they know they're good. And what are you going to do? Get rid of them? Kind of a thing. Maybe they don't say that, but they hide under that talent of it. It's like they're really good and they are really good. I've had that. Or on the other side, personality being they're not that. Like, man, dude, I've never been an organized person. I'm more go with the flow. I'm not an admin. I'm weak in admin. I'm weak in organizing. I'm weak in follow through. I've always been that way. I forget everything. I forget my own birthday. And then they hide under their own personality.
Wow.
And what happens is, I think when they're hiding under talent and personality or personality, I think what they do is they hide under that, and somehow that gives them the excuse that it's okay that they're not executing. So if you ever have team members that aren't executing at a certain level, I think it's important to find out what's really happening there and what's really the heart and the motive there. Because here's the bottom line, and this is going to sound a little harsh, but I'm paying you. I don't want to keep track of my to-do list and your to-do list. I'm paying you. Get the stuff done. I'm not really follow through. I don't know how you got to do it. Get your wife to remind you. I don't know. Have an alarm go off on your phone every hour to remind you that you need. You do whatever you got to do. but you're going to need to execute, and you need to figure that out. And the way that if I was a person that was struggling with execution, if I was teaching a person, I would say, man, what are the one or two things that you need to get done, and make sure that, and create a strategy by which you're going to get those done. And most importantly, create what I call a cadence of accountability. You got to create a cadence of accountability. You got to ask someone to hold you accountable. You got to create a system that's self-imposed, but you got to create accountability. You cannot be a person that doesn't execute. And just because you're really, really talented or really, really, personality, I'm just not that way. I don't think we can let people get away with that. And I think that we do that. And some people, one other thing I would say about it is I think some people have a good motive to execute, but they either run into one of two things. Those that have a desire to execute and they know they need to, and they're not hiding under personality, they're not hiding under talent, but they still don't execute. Usually it's a couple things. They either have idea fatigue. They always have a new idea. New idea. They never finish the other idea. That person's got to paint themselves in a corner. What I mean by that is I'm not allowed to do this until I finish this. They got to self-impose that they paint themselves into a corner. I'm not going to do this until I do this. Second thing is problem paralysis. Is once they face a problem that's too big, or they're in the middle of trying to get this thing done and they face it too big, what they'll end up doing is they'll end up putting it off. So the problem creates a paralysis in them. They don't move forward. They don't get it done, and it just ends up being in this procrastination stage. And I see that idea fatigue, and I also see it in problem paralysis. Those that want to get it done, they're not hiding under personality or talent, but they're running into these problems here. And again, they got to figure it out. Paint themselves into a corner. Problem paralysis just means you need help. That's all it means. And by the way, I like that. Here's why I like that. I always tell my team, dude, if you create a goal that you can solve by yourself, then you're not creating big enough goals.
It's good.
You got to create a goal that you need outside coaching and outside help. That's the kind of goals you need. If you're creating goals that, man, I'm setting a goal and I'm getting it done, I'm like, okay, but I need goals that you're going to need my help or someone else's help, or you're not going to be able to accomplish it. I need some of those too. Otherwise, they're too small.
That's great. Very helpful.
Yeah.
What about ministry health? Hopefully 50 years from now, I still want to be in love with Jesus. I still want to have a healthy family who loves the church, and I still want to be loving what I do as a pastor. Can you talk about some of the key practices and rhythms that, I know you've been leading now for years, and a lot of other pastors look up to you. What are some of those rhythms, those key practices, and especially like if you were to put a toolbox essentials together for pastors to be able to thrive in life and ministry, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a couple thoughts, but then I'll give you the ultimate thought that I've arrived to in my life through the help of someone that coaches and mentors me. I do think that pastors have to find balance, is what you're talking about, and keeping health. I think is what you're talking about. And I think a lot of that's obviously it's important. You don't want your calling to turn into a career. That's for sure. If your calling turns into a career, that's very, very dangerous. I tell people all the time, success outside the home never compensates for failure within it. You got to work hard on keeping the home in balance. You got to work hard on making sure that the kids realize they're a priority. The husband or wife feels like they're a priority, or all of that's got to stay in balance. You got to make sure it doesn't turn into a career. You got to make sure it stays in love with your family. You got to make sure you stay in love with Jesus. And I don't know if that will ever change, that you stay in love with Jesus, but one thing that I've always was challenged by my own coach. I've had two coaches in my life for over 10 years, and they always tell me, Chris, don't get so caught up in the work of the Lord that you forget the Lord of the work. And it just reminds me of who's most important. But above all that, as of in the last recent times, I've had someone in my own life begin to give me a different perspective. A coach in my own life, and he said, I'm starting to get a new reality on balance. and he shared it with me. And I just thought, man, that's good. And it's pretty simple. He goes, I don't think the problem is balance. I think the problem is obedience.
Wow.
And I was like, that just cuts right through like a knife, man. How do I keep it all in balance? My wife, my kids, the relationship with God, a passion for the ministry, all that. And he just told me, he said, I think we work so hard on balancing and keeping our calendar balanced to make sure that those three things are important: family, God, and ministry. And he said, but I think it's just obedience. If you decide to be obedient in those areas, you're not going to have a problem. You're having a problem because you're being disobedient. And that was only, that's only been as of recent that I've begun to start answering that question differently. I used to answer the question with all these, family, life, all that. And I believe in all that. But when it really comes down to it, Carl, it's really just an obedience issue.
So good. Yeah,
And
that's helpful.
It challenged me so much. It was just like, this is not balance. My life is out of balance with my family because I'm disobedient.
Mm.
That's why. And if I just choose to be obedient, my life won't be out of balance anymore.
Mm.
Balance is done by obedience. Balance is achieved by obedience. And so I've come to that. I've come to that reality through some help, and I've realized, like, man, and when I've been able to share that, like I just shared it with you, man, everybody I share it with is like, never thought of that before. And it ain't mine. Someone gave that to me, but I was like, is it that easy?
Yeah, you know what?
Really?
It takes the pressure off. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
that's the why. That feels right.
Yeah, that
That's
feels
the
right.
original
Like,
plan.
yeah,
That's,
got to have a date night with your wife. You got to do this. How about just obedience?
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll be okay.
Yeah,
It
good.
really does, man. It was a game changer when it was said to me. I was like, I had never thought of it that way. My whole life, I've never thought of it that way until recent. And I was like, man, that's what it's about. So anyway,
It's so good.
hey, what else you got on your mind? Anything else?
I'd love to ask you one more bonus. Can I ask you one more
Absolutely. Bonus
bonus?
question. Yeah, of course.
How do you stay fresh in your vision, your leadership, just even after years and years of ministry?
Wow. That's a good one. I think because I do feel, and this is different than the obedience, I do feel that if we're not careful, it can turn into more of a career. I think if we're not careful, that we can lose sight of the vision. I can't even begin to tell you, we do rescue. You guys did rescue a few weeks back. Gave money to help rescue churches in America, and we're rescuing hundreds of churches. We just had 79 more sign up last week, so we have churches getting rescued everywhere.
It's awesome.
But here's the thing I always say about rescuing, and I'm going to lead to what you're saying, is people always ask you, how do you discern rescuing with the right churches? Here's the bottom line: we work with those that want it, not with those that need it. If they don't want it, we work with those that want it. They may need it, but they don't want it. There are so many churches in America being led by pastors that are totally okay with the church that is small, shrinking, not doing well. And hey, man, and I'm telling you, I've talked to them where if you push through all of it, it's like they pretty much teach one message on Sunday and we'll see you next Sunday. And I have a big problem with that. I have a big problem with that. And it's not being mean. It's just, man, one guy I'm thinking of right now, obviously I won't say his name or anything, but the dude, he's got a great building in a great location. He's been there 25 years. The church has a ton of money from property that sold from many, many years ago. They just watch that reserves just get depleted as he and whoever else gets paid. The church probably runs 40, 50 people. And the problem isn't that you run 40 or 50 people. I realize if you're in a town of 100 and you run 40 people, you're owning the place. That's amazing. But what I have a problem with is when you're not trying. When you're not trying. It's the parable of the talents. And so the parable of the talents, 5, 2, and 1, I always tell people all the time, dude, I have no problem if someone is a 3-talent person. That's what way God makes them. What I have a problem with is if you're a 3-talent person living at a 2-talent level.
Wow.
You're not living out everything that you're meant to live out. Take the guy with the 1 talent. The guy with the 1 talent, it wasn't that he wasn't faithful. What was the line Jesus gave in both of those? Well done, good and faithful servant. To the 5, to the 2. Well done, good and faithful servant. I think people focus on the word faithful, but they ignore fruitful. 5 and 2 was well done, good and faithful servant. Well done, good and faithful servant. The third one, the word faithful wasn't mentioned. The problem was fruitful.
So good.
That was the problem. And no one ever sees the other side of that problem. It's like, no. He's not just expecting us to be faithful, which is an amazing quality. He's expecting us to be faithful and fruitful. Fruitful. Not just faithful, fruitful. So to answer your question, I see a lot of guys that I don't think they're keeping the vision passionate. I don't think they're keeping it in front of them. I don't know of a real great practical answer except for a couple things. One is I've got to keep myself before the Lord and ask my burden or his burdens to be mine. I want to carry, I care about the lost. I care about the people. I care about the 55,000 cars that are going to pass here today, that most of them are going to spend eternity without you. I want to catch that, Lord. I want to catch that. The other thing that I've done, it sounds real simple, is I'm always reaching a lost person. Right now, I'm working on the guy that cuts my hair. Matter of fact, I got a haircut today. When I'm done here today, I'm going to get a haircut.
Let's
to
go.
The guy that a year ago wasn't going to church. The dude has been doing drugs all his life. He's probably 35 years old. He's got, but he's been off drugs. He just celebrated his 5th anniversary of being off drugs. In the last 6 months, he started going to church. He started doing a Bible study. 2 weeks ago was his 5 years. And I knew it because I put it in my calendar. So I stopped by he's a barber at a big barber shop. He doesn't own it. And I stopped by and gave him a card and a little cake in front of all his friends. And everybody was laughing but cheering. And dude, he was almost crying. He was like, I can't believe that you remembered. And I can't believe you brought me a cake. He's got no family. He living here. He's got nothing. And he's been on coke and crack all his life, in and out of jail, all that stuff. He's gone 5 years doing good. Now he's going to church. That keeps me alive. That keeps me alive spiritually, because I know I'm going to have a conversation with him here in a couple hours when I get my haircut, and we're going to talk about the Lord, and it keeps me alive. Here's one thing I always say. I got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old granddaughter. Where I'm sitting right now in the studio, I am literally 16 minutes away from Disneyland. I've been to Disneyland, I don't know how many times. If you come and visit and you want to go to Disneyland, I'll go with you, but I'm not all that excited about it because I've been to Disneyland a million times. However, when I took my granddaughter to Disneyland, I got to see it through the eyes of someone that's never seen it before. And that's what made Disneyland so powerful.
Oh, that's so good. So good.
Go ahead.
I know. I'm getting it too. That hits.
I watch people lose their zeal for the Lord and their zeal for ministry.
Yeah.
And then I ask a lead pastor, when's the last time you led someone to the Lord? Not on Sunday morning at the altar. That's probably why you're losing it. You're not out there getting dirty. You need to get out there. You need to see it through the eyes of someone that's never seen it before. And then it will come to life for you. And I'm so glad you asked this question, because I hope that anybody that's listening that's thinking, I don't know if I'm as passionate as I used to be. I hope they do whatever they got to do to wreck their faith a little bit and get to a point where they are passionate about reaching the people in their community, about building their church, not because it's numbers, not because we're trying to compete, not because of that, but because lost people matter to Jesus and because we want to reach people. And our passion, we have to drive with passion. And I think when we're in that passion lane, Carl, I think that's when the new vision comes. When we're passionate, we're thinking of new ideas, new thoughts, new ways, new campuses, new whatever. New things come our way when we get in that passion lane. When we're outside of that passion lane, I think vision doesn't seem to happen there. I think we catch the vision of God when we catch the passion of God. He doesn't lack for
So
ideas.
good.
He's an idea factory. I mean, just walk outside in the middle of the night and look at the stars and think, your ideas are limitless, your
Yes.
ideas.
Yeah.
He's not lacking for ideas. It's interesting because the Bible says that we're crowned, that we are crowned, and it's interesting. The promises in the Bible says, you are blessed, you are crowned, you are highly favored. The one thing I always ask people is, what do those three have in common? You are blessed, you are crowned, you are highly favored. Those three at random. Besides the words you are. You know what they have in common, Carl? They're all written in the past tense. You're already crowned. You're already blessed. You're already highly favored. His crown is over here. We just have to line up with his crown. And we just have to start lining up with his passion, lining up with his drive, lining up with that. And then the vision will come and the ideas will come and the new concepts will come. Oh, I'm not that creative. Well, God is. Don't worry about it. And he'll give them to you when you start lining up into his passion. But when you don't line up into his passion, and that's when you start to see things. I want to share one more thing, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
First Samuel 1, 1 Samuel chapter 1, Hannah could not get pregnant. Theologians said that she prayed for 19 years. I don't know how they calculated that, but that's what they came up with. 19 years. This woman prayed, Lord, give me a son, for 19 years. In verse 5, it says, 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 5 says, the Lord closed her womb. If you just stop and read that verse, if we're just honest with each other, I love God, you love God, but that sounds pretty mean. Like, wow, God, really? Closed her. All she wants is a baby. She loves you. She's serving you. She just wants a baby, and you close her womb. She wasn't born that way. That's one thing, but you closed her womb. Then, 19 years later, according to theologians, she prays this prayer. She's been praying, Lord, give me a son. Lord, give me a son. Lord, give me a son. One day she walks into the temple and says, Lord, give me a son, and I will make him a Nazirite dedicated to you. Then she gets pregnant. Why now? Here's why. Because her vision finally caught up to God's vision.
Wow, so good.
Her prayer changed. Lord, give me a son. No, Lord, give me a son and I'll make him a Nazirite. And God goes, oh, finally, your prayer and your vision caught up to mine. I didn't just want you to have a son. I wanted you to have a son that was going to do extraordinary things. That's the kind of son I wanted you to have. And I needed your vision to catch up to mine before I opened up your womb or I opened up the possibility of what could happen. I think it's the same thing, man. When we line up with God, when we catch up our passion with God, when we catch up our prayer with God, boom, God opens up everything that could possibly happen. So to answer that question of fresh vision and how do you keep it alive and all that, I think it comes back to, God, have we allowed something to die inside of our heart? When's the last time we won someone to the Lord, not at an altar? When's the last time that we've cried out for people that were far from you? And God, when we start catching up to your vision, get ready for the ideas. Get ready for the vision. It will pour out, but your vision has to catch up to him. And the pathway there is, God, let my passion be your passion.
Wow, what an incredible word. That's a word. Thank you so much for that.
Well,
great.
And I'm obviously burdened with it because when we rescue churches across America, I'm like, dude, you got a building here. You're right across the street from a high school. What are you doing with this thing? Get to work, do something, try. And I think at the end of the day, man, even if you're not the best natural leader in the world, here's one thing I always tell everybody, man, when I get to heaven, man, I want to be, it's one thing I always say, man, when I get to heaven, I want to stand before Jesus, whose hands are wounded with the nails of the cross.
Yes.
And say, at least I tried.
Yes.
Oh, man, I didn't get it always right. I swung for the fence every time. I think I hit 2 home runs out of 80. But man, did I try.
That's right.
And I just want to make sure our fellow pastors across America can stand there and just say, I tried. I swung for the fence every time. I only got 2 home runs, but man, did I try. I think that's important. So
absolutely.
Anyway, there it is. I hope that was helpful to you, man.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful for your life, your leadership, and just having a space like this where I know my life is better because of what you do in this platform. And I know so many other pastors are too. So grateful for you and your leadership.
Amen. Well, thanks for being on today, man. And thanks for jumping on the podcast and hanging out. And sure do appreciate you, buddy. Have a good day, my man.
Thanks. You too, Pastor Chris.
Hey, thanks for checking out today's podcast. Hope you enjoyed it with Pastor Carl. What a great conversation. Want to remind you to go to churchboom.org. And as I said at the beginning, if you've ever thought about being a coach, we have a coaching certification program. It can help you create a second income and maybe a second chapter for your life. Make sure to check it out. It is an incredible program. You'll absolutely love it. We will see you next time on the Fly on the Wall podcast.